Let's talk about neurotransmitters. So, one of the studies I saw, this was like 7 years ago, was about estrogen's impact on dopamine, serotonin, glutamate, GABA, acetylcholine, oxytocin,
Mhm.
BDNF, melatonin, and all,
Yep.
I call them estrogen's girl gang. I'm like, the first time
That's
I
cute.
read
Yep.
this study, I was like, wait, she had like a gang of neurochemicals that helped her do this
Mm.
miraculous job. So if she goes away or she declines, what happens to these neurotransmitters? Do they like do what you're talking about where they create an upsurge? So because they're having to compensate for a loss? Or do we need to use our lifestyle to try to coerce these other neurotransmitters to keep pulsing through our brain?
Neurotransmitters and neurotransmitter systems are incredibly complicated. And again, it's very hard to look at this
Yeah.
in living humans because most of the information that we would have comes from animals in the research lab. And I would say that estrogen, all hormones are going to that can cross the blood-brain barrier, of course, and get from the blood into the brain will react and respond with there's receptors for estrogen throughout the brain, but it is localized in certain areas of the brain at higher density. The main receptors that we understand for estrogen are actually nuclear receptors, so they're not necessarily working at the level of the synapse where we've got estrogen can make a neuron automatically dial up or dial down the amount of neurotransmitter
Right.
is being released. Typically what we would see would be it's not so much about the neurotransmitter that's being released, whether that's glutamate or GABA or serotonin or dopamine. It's about the receptor where we're probably going to see most of
Right.
the action taking place
Right.
because you've got one neuron almost always just makes one type of neurotransmitter, and it's the next neuron in the chain with the receptors for that neurotransmitter which determine how the brain will react and respond. And the hormones themselves are probably because they go into the nucleus and they act on transcription factors on DNA to kind of promote or speed up or slow down protein synthesis, and that would be the synthesis of different types of receptors. So we're kind of seeing a knock-on effect here. I think the language I would use myself would be on the neurotransmitter systems versus simply thinking we're going to get more or less. If we haven't got estrogen, we're getting less serotonin release, for example. What we're probably more likely seeing is shifts over time and perhaps different shifts in different directions in different parts of the brain in terms of how the receptors are reacting and responding to perhaps again initially that roller coastering level of estrogen and then the lowering levels. Bearing in mind, of course, that estrogen is just one of many thousands of signals
Right.
that our brain is making meaning of and processing. So it gets a lot of attention right now, which is cool and good, but there's a lot of other things kind of that the brain is making meaning of and is reacting and compensating to over time. I'm mostly familiar with some of the work that's been done looking at one at dopamine and two at serotonin, and I believe actually in my woman's brain book can't remember every word I've written in it, but
Yeah, that happens.
I was looking at the role of ovarian hormones on serotonin, that serotonin neurotransmitter system, because we're looking at the receptors as well. And you could increase the level of estrogen, and in some parts of the brain, you would see that might dial up certain serotonin receptors, but in another part of the brain at exactly the same point in time, that might dial it down. So again, it's never linear. And as I said, even when it comes to the flourishing and pruning of dendrites, there's a U-shaped relationship when we look at levels of estrogen.
Right.
So it's super complicated. Estrogen will be one of the signals that's involved with these neurotransmitters and these signaling, and we can see that play out when we zoom out a bit, of course, because we're seeing the networks react and flux and change. I'm not sure whether we've got enough of a clear story there yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But calling it a girl gang's that's fun.
That's what I like to keep it all fun. I actually, the first time about 20 years ago when I started learning hormones, a friend was walking me through a Dutch test. You know, the Dutch test? It's like a ovarian, it's a urine test. It's a dried urine test to see what your hormones are. And it shows you all hormonal pathways.
Okay, right.
And I said to her, these pathways are these clinical names nobody's ever going to remember. And she's like, yeah, they should be the names of nail polish, shouldn't they? And I was
I don't know about that.
I was like, people would know it then if you gave it a nail polish name.
I think if we educate people carefully and thoughtfully, we can use the appropriate words. That's what I try and do. But maybe neuroscientist. Colours versus nail polish.
There we go. So I want to go back to what you said, though. You said that estrogen's not the only thing stimulating these neurons. So,
no.
So one of my thoughts when I saw this study on how estrogen impacted, and I love the way you said the neurotransmitter system, is, okay, so here we sit. Like, I look at my 86-year-old mom, and she'll tell you she went through menopause with no problems at all. And I would say what I'm witnessing is a very sharp brain. Of course, she had a few moments. So like, what was going on with her lifestyle? Then I look at somebody like my sister, my older sister, who is a couple of years ahead of me. And I can tell you firsthand, she didn't make it through menopause as well as she thought she did, with her brain just very quick to react to stress. And I start seeing that every woman is having a very different brain experience. And you've mentioned it a couple of times.
Yeah, so I mean, we're all different. We all understand that.
Right.
It's same as pregnancy, right?
We all have
completely, and we can all have wildly different experiences of pregnancy, even if the biological shifts are the same. And between pregnancies,
yeah,
you can have two completely different pregnancies yourself. So
that's true. That's true. So then where do you think lifestyle fits into this? Like, what the thing that has been really like weighing heavy on my heart is that the main message that's being brought to the public right now is just get on HRT and everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. The menopause conversation is wild right now.
Yes. Thank you.
I have lots I could say about this. Oh boy, I was even reading a paper this morning that was published from some researchers here in Australia talking about they've surveyed Australian women about their reactions to the massive commercialization of menopause and how the conversations are being played out. And it was very interesting to me. And you can get pushback for this. And I've been, there's all kinds of factions at the moment, for want of a better word. There was some lines in this paper, actually, I might even have it up on my computer. It's actually called All About the Money, if you can believe. Women were talking about the catastrophizing narratives about menopause, whereby commercial actors seek to connect with women and capitalize on their concerns for financial gain. So we're in this particular moment in time right now where the conversations around menopause are an active ingredient in the experiences that we have. And when it comes to the brain isn't prioritizing. The brain is making sense of information from our biological body and how we, the food we eat and how we sleep and how we exercise and our hormones and a million signals coming in from our body that we're not even aware of, that your brain is making meaning of, but also from the outside world, from what we see and hear, from the rising and setting of the sun to the messages that we are getting from our social media feeds as well. That is also an active ingredient. Wow. And I'm really fascinated by these. There's also a really interesting paper as well I was reading a couple of days ago, looking at the relationship between, I have all these papers.
I was just going to say, you're the true scientist over there pulling out.
This is my
I love
life.
It. I wish I was your neighbor.
This was talking about, although you might not like this one as much, this was talking about nocebo effects and side effect experiences based on the conversations that women have about oral contraceptive use. And that's not to say HRT pro, we should be on the pill, we should be on HRT, we shouldn't. Rather that the conversations that we are having and where our attention goes will also influence the experience that we have.
Oh my
and
God.
we need to also understand that our brain is making meaning of these signals, and where we're getting our information from can sometimes, it's so great that we have all of these, opportunities and options and tools available, but to just keep in mind that a conversation can shift an experience that you have of your own physiology.
No, that's
I've written a whole book called Baby Brain because I was so interested in this kind of social cultural narrative we have. I mean, and honestly, Mindy, I don't know whether you think this, I feel like as soon as a girl hits puberty, the conversation is about her broken female brain. As soon as you add some hormones in, it's broken, right? Puberty blues, baby brain fog.
It's all negative.
There's never any upside.
Yeah.
And there's this incredibly strong cultural narrative that has also driven the research, whereby women are going the end stages of pregnancy, perhaps, or early motherhood. Oh, my brain, I have baby brain, mummy brain. My brain isn't working.
Like an identity.
I can't do what I want it to do. But what's happened in pregnancy is that it has been reorganized to focus on the baby. Your social cognition networks have been focused, are there to adapt and respond and react to your baby, because that's kind of the Mother Nature's intention, is that you're focusing on your baby, and your memory and your cognitive function depends on your attention. So what information you take in and what you filter out. We've now got mobile phones, which are almost like a baby as well, sucking our attention. And so you can't do everything. Your brain is trying to multitask and task switch, and everything doesn't work as well. It's not, as I always say, it's not women's brains that are letting them down when it comes to baby brain, but the way that women have been primed is like, well, if my brain's not working, something must be wrong with me neurologically. And so then that's driven the research, when it's probably more of a social support issue there for motherhood. So now we've gone from this pendulum swing from, in the 90s, women were taking hormone therapy, to the Women's Health Initiative study, and this has been talked about endlessly. I was working in a breast cancer research centre when that study came out in 2002, and it was kind of like a war room panic station type situation. They were trying to dampen down the fear around hormone therapy causing cancer. We're seeing a shift back now, and in the last few years, this massive shift back.
Massive.
So menopause is starting at I've got friends in their 30s, it's perimenopause, and I'm like, you're still breastfeeding.
Yes.
It's
like a trend everybody wants on.
and I understand that when we have gaps, we have swings and conversations shift to fill that narrative. But I think that it's a bit of I'm going to say bull in a china shop. Sometimes the information is not necessarily being imparted thoughtfully in the way that we know from public health communications, from health literacy communications, the kind of space I come from. If we've got research, how do we talk about that in a really thoughtful, careful way, whereby we communicate absolute risk? We're very cautious and careful, understanding that how we describe something can influence someone's experience.
Yeah. Oh my God, that was
right now,
brilliant.
menopause isn't quite in that space. And there are researchers out there that are saying, if we're going to be talking about menopause in the workplace, is that going to have knock-on effects for gendered ageism, perhaps? Or is that enabling women to be able to talk to their manager in a way without stigma?
Yep.
We need to be using exactly the same approaches in health, about health communications and risk communication and treatment options and tools that we've always done within public health communications. But right now it's glitzy and it's having its moment, and all the celebrities are getting on board, and there's a massive, what does that paper say? All about the money. So it's just this kind of crazy perfect storm at the moment, which I actually find quite interesting, because the brain is making meaning of all of this.
Oh, that's interesting.